Up next, Authentically Detroit welcomes Onjila Odeneal, the newly appointed and first CEO Executive Director of Detroit Promise, to discuss their mission to open the doors of higher education to Detroit's youth. But first, this week's hot takes from Bridge Detroit, Outlier Media, and Chalkbeat Detroit. With clock ticking on 2025, Michigan officials eye biz incentives deal, and immigration agents arrest 2 Detroit teens now held in Texas. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages. Interested in renting space for corporate events, meetings, conferences, social events, or resource fairs? The MASH Detroit Small Business Hub is a 6,000 square feet space available for members, residents, and businesses and organizations. To learn more about rental options at MASH Detroit, contact Nicole Perry at nperry@ecn-detroit.org or 313-331-3485. Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from Detroit's East Side at the Stoudemire inside of the East Side Community Network headquarters. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. And today we have a very special guest in the studio. We have the honor of welcoming the newly appointed and first Chief Executive Officer, Executive Director of Detroit Promise, to talk about how they plan on expanding Detroit's youth's access to higher education. Onjila, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. And we have our voted youth participant, Kenneth, here in the studio. Kenneth, welcome back to Authentically Detroit.
It's been too long.
It has been. We're so happy to have you, especially with Onjila being here. Well, it's the weekend after Thanksgiving, the week after Thanksgiving. It's Monday. It's the first day of December. Donna Davidson, how is this day finding you?
It's good. You know, as I was describing right before we came on, I hit some black ice and, messed up the alignment on my husband's car this weekend. But other than that, I'm doing great.
Thank goodness for insurance.
Thank goodness for insurance. It's the kind of repair where you're like, should I use insurance or just go ahead and pay for it though? Because I don't want my insurance bill to go up, and I don't think
that's a Detroit problem.
It is a Detroit problem. It's like, oh no, I don't know if I want to use insurance, but it was so scary, and to lose control like that was so scary. I don't think I've ever hit black ice like that before, and so yeah, I'm here.
Onjila, it's good to see you in 3D. Donna, you don't know this, but we go back to my days at Bridge Detroit. And Onjila did some. She told you about it.
I read that, and I kind of remember her name.
Okay.
I remember the name. Yes.
How you doing? How's the day finding you? Welcome back to Detroit.
That part. So adjusting to winter. This is my first winter back in Michigan in about 6 years. Mm-hmm. But all is well. All is well. No complaints on my side. I'm excited to be home. Excited to be on this mission to support students like me that from the city of Detroit and pursuing their pathways towards whatever aspirations that they have.
I love it. Kenneth, how you doing? How's the day finding you?
It's very cold.
It's very,
very cold.
It's so cold in the Detroit's winter theme song. You ever heard of it? No? Oh, man.
Okay. You don't need to. It's okay.
We need to show the young people
the code,
the delicacies and the
we need to go
the
back
richness.
And pull up. We need to go back.
Right.
Yeah,
kind of, so you could know what it is. Today has been a good day. I'm good with the cold. I just wish the sun would come out a little more in the wintertime.
The gray and the cold all go together.
They're a couple. I don't think that they...
Philip was here visiting from L.A., and I'm taking him back to the airport, and he said something about, I miss gray days. And I was like, you're gonna leave now,
Right, you're
okay?
gonna leave.
Oh, I don't know
miss
what it
gray
is. Yeah,
days.
he said, oh, sometimes I just like the gray days.
So privileged.
Exactly,
So
right?
privileged to be able to say that. Tired of the LA sun, sir?
It's just always so sunny.
It's always so sunny. It never rains in Southern. Okay, I can go on and on and on. Okay, y'all, for hot takes. With clock ticking on 2025, Michigan officials eye biz incentives deal. This is by Jordan Hermione with Bridge, Michigan. Reforming how Michigan handles economic development incentives and reviewing state regulations are among the top policy priorities for lawmakers in the final month of 2025. The twin goals represent some common ground for House Republicans and Senate Democrats who haven't been able to find much agreement in a divided legislature this year. There's hope for a bipartisan breakthrough. Just before leaving the Capitol on November 13th for a break, the House and Senate both unanimously passed bills requiring lawmakers to disclose ties to pet spending projects at least 45 days ahead of the state budget passing. That was a top priority for House Speaker Matt Hall, from Richmond Township. He's a Republican who had vowed to block any Senate bills until Democrats agreed to significant earmark reforms. Now, Hall and House Republicans are focusing on economic development after defunding Whitmer's flagship corporate incentive program, the Strategic Outreach Attraction Reserve, or the SOAR Fund, in the new state budget. And signing a roughly $81 billion state budget in early October, Whitmer's office said she and the legislative leaders had agreed to pass some sort of new economic development legislation by year's end. Hall, in a November 11th interview with Bridge, said that in addition to economic development, House Republicans are also seeking to repeal various state regulations. Both the Republican-led House and Democrat-led Senate took a regularly scheduled break in late November and are slated to return to Lansing this month. Donna, what say you? Can we decode what biz is? Because I don't think people would know what biz is.
I don't necessarily know. I think it's business improvement zone, and so
that's exactly
I don't
what it
know enough about biz to tell you.
It's a
I know
TIF,
enough to
right?
be dangerous. I think it is.
It's
I
tax
think
increment financing.
it is, but I don't know enough about how it's structured and what
Yeah.
it looks like. I do know that we have to take a good hard look at our taxes. As much as I can be opposed to some use of economic incentives, I'm now aware of the impact of sunsetting economic development incentives on our community. For example, a lot of housing developments have tax incentives that are set to sunset this year. And when they do, the cost of operating that housing is going to go way up, which can impact affordability, which can impact viability of projects.
market.
And I think we need an education on what all of these things mean because they get all lumped into one thing. I had the opportunity to speak to Onjila earlier before you got here. And she was, sharing with me how Detroit Promise is financed. And it's not something I knew about. I think we have a tendency to generalize. So I'd like to have more information. I do think it's important that we put these tax incentives in place to the extent they are necessary for economic functioning of our communities. I do have a concern, and that is that Republicans in our state are going to use these to demand some types of deregulation that are actually necessary for protection of people in our state. For example, environmental deregulation. It seems as though what they've been doing in Republican legislatures, federally and locally, is using the need to do the right thing to get people to do something that is actually not in the best interest of our residents.
Yeah. One of the things that sort of stuck out to me is the requirement of lawmakers to disclose ties to a pet spending project at least 45 days ahead of the state budget passing. And we know that Governor Whitmer has been in the news for some ties to the Michigan Economic Development, MEDC Corporation, and some of her friends and appointees, getting funds through their foundation. It's just, and of course, I don't know if people know this, that executive records for the state, at the state level for Governor Whitmer, these things are not FOIA-able. So I can't FOIA Governor Whitmer's office to retrieve records or emails or to get them to answer questions. I have to rely on her comms folks to be responsive, so on and so forth. But there have been rumblings of news around just mismanagement with the MEDC and the MEDC Foundation and some of the folks that Governor Whitmer are connected to. And so I thought that was interesting that Republicans want to do that, because what happens in a Democratic-led executive branch is that the Republicans want to hold the executive to the feet to the fire. But I'm really interested to see when there is a Republican in the executive seat if they're going to have the same tone and tenor.
I mean, transparency always looks best when I'm looking in your house, right?
Absolutely.
People run for governor, and every single time they say, we're going to make our government transparent, and they get in there and they appreciate the privileges of secrecy, and they no longer want to do it. And nobody does. I am a big fan of transparency.
Me too.
I think that it is important that if you're going to have those pet projects funded or projects funded by the state legislature, that people know what they are. And I think 45 days is good notice. I think some of the other things, like your corporation that is formed has to exist for a period of time. You can't just form a corporation to receive the money. Those are important things. So I'm in favor of that. In full disclosure, our organization has benefited from some of those allocations, right?
Yeah, of course.
We got allocations from the state to do a redesign of Mack Avenue, and it's, great work. A friend of ours, Kenyatta Campbell, just got funding to support a housing project in the Cody Rouge neighborhood. And that's important work. I believe most of the money that is allocated is doing good work, so why not be transparent? But to the extent that there are also projects that benefit donors or people who are friends of people in power. And to the extent there's a lot of who sponsored this bill on behalf of somebody, there's a lot of murkiness there. We need to make that transparent, and we need to make sure our funds are used equitably and for the best, highest and best use for our taxpayers.
All right, more to come on that. Immigration agents arrest 2 Detroit teens now held in Texas. This is by Outliers' Kobe Levin and Chalkbeat Detroit's Lori Higgins. Immigration agents arrested 2 16-year-old Detroit cousins at their home on Thursday before Thanksgiving. The teens are being held in Texas. The cousins, born in Venezuela and arrived in the U.S. in 2023, were taken into custody along with 2 of their parents when agents raided their home on the east side in search of a different migrant. Both teens are formally seeking asylum in the U.S. and had upcoming court dates. They have work permits and jobs at Chili's, said Kristen Sholto, a teacher at Western International High School who works with one of the teens in an English class for newcomers. Outlier Media did not identify the teens because their parents did not give consent. Shodel said her knowledge of the situation is based on conversations with her student's mother, who had spoken with the teen's father in detention. Outlier confirmed that the father of one of the teens is being held at the South Texas Family Residential Center, a facility operated by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, through the agency's online detainee locator system. Shodel says the teens are there too, though the database does not provide information about minors in detention. Here's the quote: "If you care about education, justice in the city, defending the rights of immigrant students who are dealing with fear and trauma is a first step. 482 Forward and Detroit People's Assembly is calling on all Detroiters, including elected officials, to do all they can to get the immediate release of these young people and their family." The 2 cousins are at least the second and third Detroit students detained by federal immigration authorities this year. This spring, the arrest and deportation of Michael Boyoga Duarte, an 18-year-old student at Western, prompted protests. Donna, what say you?
This is what hate looks like. Hate looks like taking kids out of classrooms, not because they've done anything wrong, not because they're not contributing to the social well-being, because they do not have paperwork that says they can be here legally. And it always is accompanied by, exaggerated fears, like, they're criminals and they're bringing in fentanyl and they're doing all of this stuff. But this is what hate looks like, because there's no rationale or justification for taking these kids out of here. It creates terror in families. It creates terror in communities.
And in the schools.
And in the schools.
And their communities.
And it invites hostility and racist actions by people who are cheering this on. Kenneth, I see you sitting forward, and I want to hear from you because you are a student in Detroit Public High Schools.
I actually spoke at the rally across from Western with 482 Forward. and I actually advocated for those two students. Those two students are actually friends of a friend of mine, and I spoke on it, how it doesn't make sense. And it's like, we want to stop all these terrorist groups, but we have our own terrorist organization here.
Yeah, I mean, when a white person, American-born white male, kills everybody, it's mental illness, and there's no new policy to punish white males.
And it's like,
But when it's an Afghanistani person, now all of a sudden we're no longer going to allow immigrants from third world countries, which is a name I thought we had put to rest years ago, but now we're bringing it back out because we have the kind of leader of this nation who likes to engage in that kind of talk. But, it's terrible.
yeah, and it's like, what's the point? We're supposed to be one. We are the United, I put that in quotes, the United States of America. We're supposed to be together, not apart. And you doing all of this is not making us seem united. You're making us look disunited. And
What is the emotional impact on you?
it's like, I have immigrants for friends. So it's like, I pray for them every day so they don't get apprehended by ICE next. Because it's like, it doesn't make sense. They're coming here to get an education. They're not here to hurt us. They're not here to take anything from us. They're here to learn and make their lives better, just like we are. And it's like, if you're going to do that, you might as well start taking American kids who you think look like immigrants and take them there and see how you feel.
That's happening too.
That's happening. Ask folks in Chicago. The graph that sort of sticks out to me that Kobe wrote, it says both teams are formally seeking asylum in the U.S. and had upcoming court dates, and they have work permits and a job. So you can be going through a formal process in this country and have upcoming court dates, and ICE can still just detain you and put you in what I will call, not a concentration camp.
Yes.
Some of these conditions are, right? These camps, these facilities, and it really is scary. It brings to mind, the deputizing of any and everybody to apprehend somebody who looks a certain
Exactly.
way, right? And we know where that comes from.
To look who looks a certain way, to bully them.
Yeah.
To, talk about them, to discriminate against them. And it's really hurtful. And, when I read these stories, the pit of my stomach, I feel sick.
Yeah.
To imagine that we live in a place where we are just intentionally harming people because of how they look, because of where they're from, not because they've done anything wrong. They're talking about looking at green cards of people who are here legally and have done everything and gone through the process to see how they can seek to remove some of these people. So when people tell you who they are, believe them. Mm-hmm. Trump told you who he was the first time he ran for president, and certainly in between then and the second time he ran for president, and he is now doing everything he said he was going to do. Onjila, you are working to help facilitate higher education access, and you've worked on educational policy, so I know you must have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, lots of thoughts. But I think more consideration needs to go into move away from this aspect of punishing the people who do not align with me in the direction of the country in general. So when we think about the higher ed side, the number of cuts that are happening with financial aid, the snatching away of student loan programs, the recent announcement of classifying before classified professional degrees as non-professional.
That's right.
Nursing, teaching, deficit women-dominated spaces.
But theology is still a professional degree. No offense, theologians, but I'd rather make sure that my nurse has the
resources that they need so that they can actually learn what they need to learn before they start working on people.
Right, because we already have a shortage, right?
Yeah. Nursing, social work teachers, they're all on that list.
And we're kicking them out of the United States. We have so many immigrants coming over here who have those professions, so it impacts our healthcare. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So those are the biggest things for me, is it's in one breath saying that people aren't doing and they're, lazy and not doing their part. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps, then when the ones who are, to take away the resources necessary for them to do so. So you want me to get these degrees. You want me to fill these talent gaps within the country. but you're not allowing me to access the resources necessary for me to do so. So from my perception, it's just like a lot of backtracking on the progression of people in America in general. And then when you look at it from the immigrant stand, this is a country built on immigration. So it's like we are all, to some extent, if you're not indigenous, then you're an immigrant.
Well, not necessarily when you're stolen.
Yeah, I mean, then there's that dance.
You
but
are-
I'm saying we are not native to this
Well, we're
land.
not native to this land, but I do think there's a difference
No,
in
no,
people
I'm not
who are
saying that it's
forced
not.
here as, refugees and people who immigrated here by choice. And I understand what you're saying. I just
Yeah.
always want to make that distinction.
No, absolutely.
Because
Like,
we didn't
no.
come by way of Ellis Island, right?
No,
My
yeah.
ancestors did not. But anyway, but go
so
on.
not saying that is not a thing. I'm saying in this particular moment when we're looking at immigrants as if they are, and it's kind of like if you didn't get the same protection, support, and pathways as you're not allowing them to have, you wouldn't be here.
I've never talked to Native Americans about their experiences during these, raids on immigration, but I would imagine they're also being treated a certain kind of way
Yeah.
because, a lot of Native American people look like Latin American people because a lot of Latin American people have Native American, ancestry. And so it's just hate.
Yeah. And what is the line? Like what is the line in terms of you pulled I look like? What do I need to show you?
Oh, the line is always moving.
Exactly.
line
Like
is
the
always
goalpost
moving.
keeps
The
moving.
goalpost keeps moving, and we learned that in the raids in Chicago in apartment buildings when
Yep.
they were taking black folks, right? Who I have to state this just for the record. Who, in the beginning of all this thought, a segment of black folks thought, well, they voted for him and this is what they get, without ever thinking that
You could potentially
that
be
you
next.
can get swept up in this too. It was such an ignorant viewpoint, an uneducated viewpoint for people to have at the beginning of these ice sweeps. And so,
But people get manipulated. And I
Yeah.
want to give love to people who get manipulated because a lot of
Sure.
people are suffering and they want to believe they're the exceptions. And we turn all of our anger on other suffering people and not on the people who are causing the suffering. So if you voted for Trump or you believe that nonsense, shame on you. But also I have compassion for people who bought into that because there is a weaponization of anger. There's a weaponization of hurt that happened that was very intentional. It's not as though people just woke up and decided to side with these people. Remember when Trump said that Mexicans are taking black people's jobs? And
Yes.
a lot of us are like, what's a black job? But for people who find themselves marginalized economically,
It's a black
maybe that
job.
made sense. Maybe
Yeah.
it made sense to blame them instead of other people. But when you talk about what the line is exactly what it was when W.E.B. Du Bois said the problem with the 20th century is the color line. It is still the color line. It is still whiteness.
it's a
And-
great usage
Yeah.
of Du Bois. Donna, give us
Yeah,
that.
so we're there, and I
really
think
good.
let's just be conscious of it. Let's not try to pretend as though we can really relate to people who don't see us as human, right? And one of my great concerns has been the fragmentation among people of color. How we don't like those people and they don't like us, and we talk about each other, and
Yep.
all it does is benefit white
Yep.
supremacy.
That's all it does.
When we come together, and even the splintering of people of African ancestry. Well, were you born here? Were your ancestors slaves in the United States, or were they slaves in Cuba? Because
She
if they were
coming for
slaves
you.
in Cuba or in Jamaica, they weren't really enslaved. It's like, this is
Come on, A.
crazy.
Get him, Donna.
This
Get
is
'em.
absolutely crazy. We should be loving all of us. And all of us come from the same place historically down, and anyway, so I don't want to go too far into it, but I just think that it's hate. Let's call it what it is. It's absolute hate. There is no public policy benefit. And I think Onjila just did a great job explaining what the public policy harm is by this. We are being harmed economically and socially. If you've been to a hospital and you've been unable to access health care, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
If schools don't have enough teachers, it's going to get worse. All of those workers we called essential workers in 2020, when we were all sheltering in place and they had to go to work, we have fewer essential workers, and it's going to get worse until we decide as a people that everybody counts.
If you have stories that you want to discuss on Hot Takes, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, in X, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. We'll be right back. Have you ever dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network is here to make those dreams come true. Formerly known as the Deep Network and located inside the Stoudemire, the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your idea off of the ground. Just visit authenticallydet.com and send a request through the contact page. Welcome back to Authentically Detroit, everyone. Detroit Promise announced the appointment of Onjila Odeneal as its first Chief Executive Officer, Executive Director, marking a historic moment as the program enters a new chapter. Odeneal, a Detroit native, first-generation college graduate, and seasoned education and policy leader, officially began her role on October 1st. Detroit Promise provides every eligible Detroit high school graduate with a tuition-free path to college or trade school. Since its launched in 2013, the program has supported more than 6,000 students, ensuring that financial barriers do not prevent Detroit's students from pursuing higher education. Odeneal brings more than 15 years of experience in higher education, youth development, and statewide advocacy. She most recently served as Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Institute for College Access and Success, where she secured historic financial aid investments and built coalitions to center student voices in Michigan's higher education policy. She also served as Acting Executive Director and Deputy Director of the Detroit College Access Network, or DCAN, and has held leadership roles in financial aid and nonprofit consulting. As Detroit Promise's CEO, Odeneal will focus on advancing the organization's strategic priorities, which include increasing awareness of the program among middle school and high school students, strengthening partnerships with colleges and employers, and expanding student support to improve persistence and completion rates. Onjila, we are so excited to have you here.
Yes.
It's good to see you. Talk about, before we get into your role, tell us, the arc of your Detroit story. What's your Detroit story?
First gen, grew up in poverty, west side of Detroit. Detroit Public Schools, K through 12.
At high school.
I went to Crockett when it was the Shack on Mac. So
The
not when
Shack
it
on
moved
Mac.
to the east side, when we were still by Receiving and Hutzel, across from Spain Middle School. My story, my family story, my mother's story, my grandfather's story is Detroit. So deeply vested in shifting the experiences that I had as a student, especially in being first gen. I was considered a high scholar, but there were so many things that I struggled with that I just feel like students shouldn't have to, with all of these things in place. And since then, that was over 20 years ago, we have more resources and more programming and more money circulating around these supports for students, but we have the same outcomes. And for me, I literally changed the trajectory of my career because I was actually interested in being an attorney because of what I experienced as a student. So should have been a joyous occasion for me, graduating from college, being the first in my family to earn a bachelor's degree, I cried because of how hard it was and how difficult the journey was within itself. I worked 3 jobs when I was at undergrad. Because I was on scholarship, maintain an 18 credit load most semesters in order to get through.
That's insane.
While maintaining
18
outer level
credits?
status.
Shoot.
So
And that does not always happen when students go to college from Detroit.
Yeah. So, and seeing that, but then also being from an environment where I know the people's potential that they weren't able to tap into because of the systems that surround them. Some of the smartest people I've ever known never had the opportunity to go to college.
That's right.
I'm so glad you bring that up because, sometimes there's a tendency on part of those of us who have, quote unquote, made it to think that we are an exception. Talk about why that's not your story.
That's not my reality, because one thing that my mother always taught me is that you don't know other people's story and you need to position yourself to empathize with people's realities. A lot of things could take you off course. It doesn't mean that it's your aptitude or your potential, like life, just life for us, especially in cities like Detroit. So everything down to the student who had to stay back to take care of their family and their siblings, the student who, like, I had a friend who was shot our senior year of high school, and he was a star athlete. Like, he wasn't able to pursue those dreams because
The
his
barriers
dreams
are
taken away from
structural,
him.
not individual.
Yeah.
And we put them on the individuals. Now, you're the first generation college student, right?
Yeah.
So you're not the only smart person in your family.
Absolutely
You're not
not.
the first smart person. You come from a generation clearly of people who were intelligent
Yes.
and blessed you with their knowledge and skills, but didn't have that opportunity.
Yep. And then for me as a student, I was just like, I looked around, like the neighborhood I grew up in, my mother grew up in. The neighborhood that my mother grew up in is the neighborhood that my grandfather moved to when he migrated here from Tennessee for work at the plants. So for me, as I looked around my neighborhood as a kid, I was just like, all my mom's friends are here. All my grandfather's friends are here. And it's just like, why does no one ever make it out of here? I grew up on Puritan and Dexter. It was interesting. It still is interesting, to say the least. But for me, I was just like, what is my ticket out? Like, what is my secession from this place? And I anchored on academics. It wasn't easy. Like, a lot of people think that academia is just a natural trait that you have. Like, for some of us, it takes a lot of practice. I have dyslexia.
We had to try. I had to study.
You have dyslexia.
I have dyslexia, and it was a late diagnosis in terms of me being identified as dyslexic. But that made school extremely difficult, like reading passages 10 times before I understood what it was saying. Learning study habits that weren't the same study habits that they try to teach you how to do because they didn't work for
How
me.
did you get it diagnosed? I know that there is an underdiagnosis of dyslexia in urban communities.
Yep. So in the 80s and the 90s, sometimes they would bring testing to respective elementary schools. So I was tested at my elementary school.
That's wonderful.
Like, they would bring someone in for glasses. Like, that's how my younger brother, he was practically blind, didn't even know it. So, but for me, it was dyslexia. I was actually placed in special ed in the first grade because I struggled with reading and interacting with students, but it was really me not understanding what was happening. But I advocated for myself as a first grader to be removed out of the special ed class because I literally went to the principal's office every single day. Like, I do not belong in this class. Like, I do not belong in this class. And then when they did the testing, he had me tested.
That's
So
amazing, though, that you had to do that. First of all, that you did that. And think about your life trajectory if you did not.
And that part, so that's where a lot of my empathy building started, because I looked at my friends who didn't have that agency in terms of being able to speak up for themselves and speak up against things that were happening. If they weren't learning things, like I couldn't afford that. Like, I had this
And you
mission.
had that agency because you gave it to yourself. Where
Yeah.
did that come from?
It was like, I
Because no
didn't
one appointed to you and say, hey, speak up for yourself. You intrinsically did that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it was an intrinsic thing, like something that just boiled in within me. My mother worked very hard. Like, she worked 2 to 3 jobs, like, most of my life, right? And I just didn't want it to be another thing on her list that she had to deal with. So it was my support of her not having to come to
Now,
my
what
school.
age was this?
I was 6.
In elementary school.
That is
First grade.
so beautiful. At 6
It's
years
amazing.
old to
You
think,
had that
I want to
consciousness.
take
Yeah.
this off of my mother's
I was always
list
that
of
way.
things.
So my mother and my grandmother called me their angel child. I was also born at 444, so that goes along with it with numbers. But
444.
Yep, it's an angel number.
Okay.
But with that, like, I've always been kind of like this protector, this keeper, this safe space haven for my family, even at a very, very young age. So yeah, that was my thought process, was because I knew that she didn't know I was placed in special ed because nobody informed her. So I'm like, let me try to see if I
My
can
Lord.
fix this situation
Lord.
before she finds out. Because I just didn't want it to be another thing. Like, I had older siblings and things of that nature, and her juggling all of us. It was 5 of us by herself while also trying to work and keep a roof over our head and manage all the dynamics that was happening in the community as well to keep us safe. It was just like,
So your mother is an amazing person.
yeah, she is. Like, she is the foundation of who I am. Like, We started doing service at a very young age. So, like, before the clean sweep days, we were cleaning our local park. My mother would take me and my siblings to clean our local park.
So she worked 3 jobs, navigated the neighborhood,
Yeah.
had 5 kids, and cleaned the neighborhood. I want to meet your mother so I
And
can
make
just give her a high
make sure you
five.
send her this, because
Yes.
it's very rare where we're able to have platforms to speak our people, our mothers, the people who raised us, the people who grounded us into the world and into the record.
Yeah.
And you're doing it right now. You're doing it so beautifully. It would be, I think, the greatest gift and ode for her to be able to hear.
And it
Yeah.
is wonderful
Yeah.
to hear. It's just a beautiful story, and it speaks to the intrinsic beauty of so many of our people
Yeah.
that don't get seen, right?
Yeah.
The invisible beauty of people who are just doing stuff. That's what I love about Detroit.
Yeah.
Because Detroit is spawned so many beautiful people. I learned some things about Detroit Promise that I did not know.
Okay.
So
Donna, I'm sorry. Wait. Because she has a really interesting story. I want to get to the Detroit Promise piece, but can you talk about your journey to Detroit Promise first?
Yes.
Because I know it was some ebbs and flows and
It's a
bumps in the
dance.
road. It was a little dance, and you couldn't be all of who you were or are in some of these positions that you held.
So when I graduated from college, well, I mean, it was before I graduated from college, I started a mentor. I didn't call it a mentor program. It was called Round These Kids Up in This Neighborhood and Do Something. But I started when I was 15, and I ran that until I was 25. So every summer, I would just work with the kids in the neighborhood. I did everything from tutoring to sports, like whatever they wanted to learn, I figured it out, because what I realized was I caught some kids doing some stuff in the park they shouldn't have been doing. And I looked around and was just like, they really don't have examples beyond. So who's going to be that example? So I made a conscious decision at 15 to step away from my social circles to be a better representation for the youth in my neighborhood. And it wasn't that we were like horrible kids or anything like that, but it was just like we are shaping them in how we carry ourselves, because it was a lot of kids. It was like 25 of us that were millennials in the neighborhood. And I'm talking a 4 or 5 block, like not far at all. But I did everything with them. It's one of my first mentees. She actually graduated from law school a few years ago.
Oh, that's amazing.
So like, it's those moments of like personal sacrifice. But when I was in undergrad and preparing for my LSAT, I was just like, because I was a pre-law student, so LSAT was like practice, PS. It was part of our requirement for
get in law
our
school.
certification and to get into law school. I knew I didn't want to practice in Michigan, given what I had learned, because I didn't want to go to law school in Michigan as well. But I couldn't, like, it was just really hard, because it means that I had to leave the kids that I was working with. And given some of the dynamics of what they were experiencing at that time, I just felt like I can't leave them, because then they'll have no one, right? And we take on that ownership when we're in this work of humanitarianism, right? So I kept pushing it. I kept pushing my date for my test. Like, I'm going to take it later. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to take it later. And then I graduated. And it was just like my experience and my journey was, and the things that I experienced as someone who has agency skills, as someone who has advocacy skills, as a high scholar, I struggled like a lot. Like, it was extremely difficult. Housing insecurity, food insecurity, like everything that you can check off on the box, I experienced it as an undergrad. And I'm like, all these people in place, all these voices at these tables, all this work that's happening, all this investment for me to still have the experience that I had, and then also watch a lot of my friends not make it to the finish line, watch a lot of people from my community not have the opportunity. And I was just like, I can't do this. Like, because the whole point of me going to law school was to make money so I can give back to my community. So I was always this like aspect of rooted in my community. I was just like, you know what? Let's just jump straight to it. Yeah. So when you jump straight to it without the money and that entering the workforce, like, people don't think about, when you think first gen, you think college. We're first gen everything. First gen job, like full-time job, first gen salary, first gen, like a lot of like in terms across the board. So that navigation within itself of like, I don't know what is a good salary. I don't know what is benefit. Like, how does that even work? Because I haven't had anybody in my family that experienced or had access to that. So I applied to hundreds of jobs. I started in as an AmeriCorps Vista, doing community organizing work in Southwest Detroit. I went from there to doing curriculum writing for Detroit Public Schools and taking core standards and pulling together community service projects and pairing those. So I would write curriculum for embedding community service into the classroom. But during this time, I'm applying to hundreds of jobs. Like, I need to be in the space of either community development or youth development. And nobody would hire me. Like I would not get an interview call. I wouldn't get access to any of these things. But when I was doing community organizing work, the work that we did in Southwest Detroit, and at the time it was Southwest Solution that eventually went to the Harriet Tubman Center, we worked with helping the community work closely with the schools to create centers to advocate for what they needed from their respective community. And I knew that I was deeply rooted in youth development. So I'm just like, the best way to get to those hard to reach kids is through school. Like, even with absenteeism, even with all these other barriers that keep the consistency, that is a landing place for youth. So I'm like, I have to get into education. I don't know how I'm going to do it because I had no education background. My degrees were in business and pre-law and poli-sci. So that within itself did not open doors. Like, even with that degree, it didn't open doors. And the first folks to call me back after a year and a half of applying to jobs was financial aid.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, you know what? We're going to go in here. We're going to build some education work experience so I can keep segueing way through there. But my first role was at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. I worked in the outreach unit. In the outreach unit, we work with students regardless of what institutions they were interested in. So we were the ones doing the FAFSA nights, doing the financial literacy workshops and things of that nature across the state. I also had Chicago as well. But hundreds of these type of events with families. I was positioned to call institutions when their information wasn't clear on their websites because that's federal regulation. Like, no, your full cost of attendance need to be found. But doing that advocacy and that agency for students and families that are just trying to navigate what's supposed to be available to them, it had me in a space of, one, I had a lot of challenges with financial aid when I was in undergrad as a first-gen student. But it shouldn't be that hard. And we shouldn't, like, even from the institution side, we're supposed to be here to help students. And you have those who do, and you have those who this is just a job. And while the experience was great there because I was able to work with students who are coming from backgrounds like myself and working in an outreach unit, I was just like, something's got to give. Like, something's wrong with the systems. Like, even down to when families were called, they wouldn't know what questions to ask. They didn't know what they were looking for, or they received misinformation from counselors or community, or well, somebody told me I didn't have to do X. Like, ooh, you just missed out on $20,000 because you didn't do X. There's nothing I could do at this point. And I kind of got exhausted with being the one, bearer of bad news, but two, like, witnessing the heartbreak because a step was missed. So from there, I transitioned and went to American University in D.C., where I was an assistant director. So I was able to see more of the inner operations of an institution and just like some of the processes that go into admissions and so on and so forth beyond just me administering aid. And it was just disheartening across the board. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't sit in a space where I feel like I'm breaking some type of rule because I'm giving our families the information that they need that they don't have access to. But the affluent family that has gone multiple generations through college know how to navigate these systems. They know what to ask. They know there's an appeal process. But my student who have their first gen student waited until the second year. And now I'm saying your family lost their house. They lost their jobs. And you didn't contact us when this happened. You could have got money in that year and not had to wait until the next year. And it just got to a point where I was just like, I do not feel like I'm a service to my community, and that defeats the purpose.
So
I did
you
not.
used all of these experiences to then take these experiences into actual work.
Yep.
Where you were able to create strategy and policy around
Yep.
that. Can you talk about the strategy and policy journey that you followed?
Absolutely. So when I left higher ed, I went into consulting, education consulting work. Working with schools and nonprofits on improving strategy, efficiency, systems, grant writing, because these were the things that I've always been good at. And that's when I met Ashley Johnson at Detroit College Access Network. I was a consultant for her to help build out a grant program to improve college-going culture within schools. And It went great. Like the program went amazing. Like to the point, like for an example, Pershing was one of our first schools that was that year that they were a college bound fellow, because that's what we call them, for receiving. They were all able to get $10,000 grants to help improve the college going culture within the school, and that was everything from putting a poster on the wall, because some of these schools didn't even have like imagery of anything post education, like in terms of seeing themselves in a different light. But Pershing that year was one of the first fellows out of the 10. We did middle schools and high schools. It was the first year that every student applied to college. They hit, I believe it was like either 78 or 80% FAFSA completion that year, and it was actually recognized by the governor for being above 75%. They amplified their alumni network, because that's what we were teaching them, how to utilize the resources they had right at their hands, instead of positioning themselves to say that I don't have because this check didn't land here. Like not knowing what resources are immediately available to achieve the same outcomes, and have them think about it and frame it in different ways. But again, every school had 10,000. They didn't use any of their money because it came from other sources, because they started to think about how do they leverage all of these networks and communities that are already close tied, and their alum group being one of them, because they was like, we want to do more, but we don't know what to do. But as they start to put together these plans and ideas of what they can do, like the alum created basic necessity like bags. So it had like laundry kits, toiletries and things of that nature that went out to students. They took them on trips. Like it started mentoring, like all these things, and not like all this time we went without doing anything because you felt like you didn't have the resources. But when you realize it wasn't the resources, it was the creativity.
My goodness.
Will help elevate that. And all of our schools, like that year, that was the first year that we ran it, they only used 20% of the actual allocation for that grant.
Goodness. Wow. Donna, I know I cut you off. I'm sorry I cut you off, Donna.
No. This is fascinating.
Promise stuff.
This is
fascinating.
I knew it was fascinating. That's why I wanted her to kind of give us the background.
Your background really cements you as a leader who is authentically in that space.
Yeah.
You are a person who's walked it, lived it, talked it, supported it, created programs for it. You then moved into policy space, and briefly talk about your policy space, because I want to get to the Detroit Promise. It's really exciting.
Absolutely. So when I was at DCAN, I actually was contacted by TICAS. They were looking at actually anchoring their work in the state of Michigan.
TICAS.
So TICAS is the Institute of College Access and Success. It is a national nonpartisan higher ed policy organization. They do work at the federal and the state level, and also have national threads of work as well, such as like basic needs for students and college completion. But I manage the Michigan portfolio. So in me going into that space, I didn't have a policy background. I had policy awareness. So what happens is they would contact me throughout the time that I was acting executive director and ask me like, hey, how does this policy impact community? And I would let them know, like, okay, based off of this language, this is what this will look like. This is how the barriers that exist. So when they created the director role for the state of Michigan, they was just like, we were wondering if you're interested, like, because you get it at the 10,000 foot view, but you also get it on the ground. And usually those two don't meet. It's rare that you get someone who understands both levers. So when I got into the space, one thing that's really big for me is community engagement, because it should be us that are informing our respective spaces. What I watched a lot in all of my roles was a top-down approach where people don't understand what's actually happening on a day-to-day basis. And I'm like, I refuse to work like that. We need to have students included, and we also need to have community included. I don't want to be one that's saying that we're including community voice and it's because we sent out a survey. Like, absolutely not. I need every aspect of our work to be ingrained with this element of community engagement and student engagement. So with that, we built some community, because that wasn't a norm in terms of that time. I'm like, in the 3 years, it has shifted. I will say that, because people start to see the power and the benefit of community voice. Because the limitation was that if people don't understand policy jargon, then they won't understand how to articulate. And my pushback was like, well, we're the experts. It is our job to then translate what it is that they're saying and identify where those barriers are within these policies to make adjustments. So my work focused on, and how I built out the Michigan team, was for the inclusion of community. All of our policies that we advocate for come from community. They not only select the issues, but they vote on the top 5 ones that we should champion in that respective year. Like, what are the most urgent things on the table? The other thing in terms of creating a student space, we created a student fellowship, which was a paid fellowship, year-long fellowship, where we taught, and the target was students who do not have a background in policy. It wasn't for the purpose of resume building. It was for the purpose of identifying the stories and realities of students across the state to help inform the direction of policy. So when we brought them in, our target, so in terms of the application process, you just have to graduate from a Michigan high school. Like, that's it. Because sometimes those rules and requirements make students count themselves out. Exactly. They see a GPA, they say it's not me. Like, they automatically see themselves as not being part of that.
And I would imagine that the students that you do get, when you base it on those criteria, are not representative of the student body as a whole.
Yes, I want the student who was adopted, the student that ran away at 16. I want the student that's staying with the grandparent who don't understand the things, or I want the student who is a first-generation immigrant. Like, I want those stories, because that is where the barriers exist within the education space, is reaching them.
Speaking of students, we have one right here. Where is this hitting you, Kenneth?
I mean, it's hitting me in a lot of places I can't name or put into words right now, but it's like, I like the advocacy that you're doing and the drive that you have. I'm currently working on my nonprofit, trying to get that pushed out, because I want to push for special needs, getting assistant teachers back into classrooms, and possibly even assistant teaching into classrooms again, because it showed more growth and success with the students than to just have one singular teacher in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And my question to you, for you being on Detroit Promise now, is like, what are you going to do about the My Invested Child thing that was just passed at the board meeting? Are you gonna also lean on to that, the better funding for students going
Invest in My Kid? The ballot initiative.
Yeah.
Could you say more?
Invest in My Kids is a ballot initiative that would create a surcharge or a tax on individual incomes, personal incomes of over $500,000.
Okay.
And joint filers over $1 million.
Okay.
So anything up to $500,000 or $1 million, you get taxed at the normal rate, but then there'd be an extra 5% added to those additional. Right now there's a ballot initiative. We're collecting signatures for a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I can't speak on behalf of the Promise when it comes to that, but for me personally, I do think that we do need to do a better job at pouring back into our respective spaces. At the end of the day, like, these additional resources or this additional tax is nothing. Like, that's an outfit for some folks within those tax brackets. If we can make a difference for the respect of a child's life or a child's trajectory, like, that piece becomes important. We can't just position ourselves to capitalize off of the few dollars that happen at the bottom and not see ourselves as responsible for giving back to these communities that created the advantages and privileges and resources that we have.
Yeah. One of the other things about that is that people who are higher income earners tend to pay a lower percentage of taxes because of all the tax breaks that you get for owning property or business losses, and all of those things mean that the effective tax rates of the highest income earners are lower than the effective tax rates of people who are lower income and really struggling.
So a little deeper out of my bucket in terms of my realm and focuses on the work, but in terms of my aspects of giving back and community humanitarianism, like, that is a big piece for me. Like, we all have a responsibility to each other. Like you said earlier.
You started at 15 years old.
Yeah, I'm like, you like you said earlier, we are the United States.
Yes.
So why is there felt punishment in helping us stay united and helping us leverage and move up in advance, so that way we can all be successful collectively? Because the next man failure is not mine.
Right.
So why isn't it, within ourselves to give ourselves back? I was the person who gave my last dollar out of my pocket, because if in that moment I didn't need it and they needed it more, that was more important to me. That's how I was raised.
And research will show that Black folks give more of our dollars to
we
things
are the most
like that.
philanthropic group segment in the United States.
Don't get recognized for it, though.
Don't get recognized
but
for it.
we do it. Mm-hmm. Detroit Promise.
Detroit Promise.
This is such an exciting opportunity for kids. I was completely misinformed, and I think other people are, and I just can't wait for you to share what that is and what you're doing.
So yes, and what Donna is speaking of is what we were chatting about earlier, that the Detroit Promise is funded through tax capture. So these are funds that are coming from state tax capture in terms of the revenues that are happening within our respective space. There are currently, I believe, 13 or 14 Promise zones across the state of Michigan, Detroit Promise being one of them. But it's resources to be able to give back to students to pursue post-secondary pathways. So right now we have 32 institution partners. That is 7 community colleges, 25 four-year institutions. That's most of our publics, our private institutions as well. The element of trade is, a lot of people don't know that most of our community colleges offer trade programs.
Right.
That has been the shift in the times in terms of seeing what people need, but also seeing the support that is necessary to go along with it. So one thing that I would advise students is, if you are interested in trade, see if it is available at your community college, because some of those other networking pieces go in alignment with it,
And it's
in
also-
terms of supporting you.
It's also more affordable than a lot of the private trade schools, right?
Yeah. So, when you look at some of the trade programs, they can be expensive, but the aspect of financial, because I used to do financial literacy, like giving a background, like what some of my work was when I worked in financial aid specifically, is there are a lot of free pathways for Black students. It's just that we do not structure our planning around that free pathway and identifying what those free pathways were, even before Detroit Promise. Detroit Promise is helping make clearer pathways to financial fortitude as it relates to your financial.
Is this a last dollar scholarship that you guys provide?
So it is interesting because it is state. There is a state statute around it, but it is a interesting alignment with state programs as well. So it depends. So that's why I'm like, all of that was to say it depends. So last year, the statute language around Promise zones actually expanded. Initially, it was only for tuition and fees, so naturally it falls as a last dollar. But last year, the language was expanded to go towards the full cost of attendance. I actually supported with Michigan Promise Zone Authority in the expansion of the language. So that way, we're not keep revisiting like, oh, now students have transportation issues. Can we do that? So no, just expand it to the entire thing. Everything that a student
That's
would
so
need.
great.
So now Promise zones are in positions to look at our respective development plans, what resources we have to be able to support students. So one of the things that I'm looking at is, and one of the reasons why I was brought on by the board for this role, is that the program is bigger than a scholarship. So it's not just a scholarship that the students receive support with. They also receive one-on-one coaching, book stipends, emergency grants. There's a lot of resources, but what's happening is students are not connecting with the Promise because they're counting themselves out, because either I'm not made for college or I'm going to go this route. But the reality of it is that if you connect with us, you create a network of resources. And that's everything from programming, like some of the programming needs that I'm seeing across the city. This is something that I did when I was at Detroit College Access Network. But resume building, internship, network, all these soft skills that we don't have access to in our communities, being that Detroit students are mostly first generation students. These are skills that we need in order to be successful, not only in college, but after we graduate as well. So if I don't know that I need an internship to build my work experience, then when I graduate in my respective field and I can't get a job because I don't have any work experience to go along with that, that's not a reality for families and students who know that, because those students are doing summer internships. They are taking on jobs that's not just at the cafeteria, but the ones that actually build their portfolio so that they can be hireable after they graduate into viable careers. So
let's talk about the tuition, the
Yes.
4-year tuition. There was a time when there was a grade point minimum in order to get into the 4-year college, to get the scholarships, and also a test score minimum.
Yep.
What does that look like right now?
So now the GPA is still there. It's not as high for some institutions. Most of them are 3.0, but there are some schools that are under that, and that they have their wiggle room as it relates to being able to get students in. The test scores, though, are removed, and that was dropped after the pandemic. So because a lot of students
I didn't know
couldn't
that was
test.
still removed. I thought it came back.
You remember how we had students back when you worked here, and there were students at Southeastern who
Yes.
could not access that 4-year because test scores.
Test scores.
Yeah.
So that
So
made
for
me want to
Promise,
dance.
yeah.
I'm just saying, it made me want to dance hearing that. And yeah.
Yeah, so they no longer have a test score requirement to access Detroit Promise.
This is really, really great. One of the things that I've been thinking about in recent days is that NBC just released a poll saying that 63% of people are saying that a bachelor's degree is not worth the cost because people often graduate without specific job skills and with a large amount of debt to pay off. So I think we can all agree that college, the cost has become exorbitant, right?
Yep.
Exorbitant. Am I saying it right? Did I say it right? Whatever. But, one of the things that, I was thinking about as you were talking about, the kinds of students that you want to reach. You want the student that lives with grandma. You want the student that dropped out. It's because even if the survey results are saying this, who's still sending their kids to college? The 1%?
Well,
okay, and I want to speak to a couple of things that you just uplifted. First, the reason why this tug of war conversation of is college worth it? We are moving into an economy that a high school diploma does not have the same purchasing power that it had in the 80s. Like, you are not just entering companies and hitting the middle class. The reality of it is, like, just given some of the data that I pulled when I was at the state level, 84% of Michigan's top jobs require a bachelor's degree. Like, a bachelor's degree. And then there's another, like, 50-60% that requires a bachelor's degree plus something else, whether it is licensing, certifications, master's degrees, so on and so forth, as it relates to those credentials. We have to be, one, honest with our students about the reality that they are walking into. They are charting on paths that are looking at education as aspects of necessity, but also telling them not to go. And that is dangerous, especially for our community, because we anchor on this reality. And what I've learned to do is educate with information that people can, actual consumable information. So, for example, one of my little cousins graduated for the class of 2024. And my family was raving about an area of interest that she was going into that didn't require a degree. Oh, that's a great job. She's going to do great. And my question was like, what makes that a great job? And they were like, because it pays like $30 an hour. I'm like, oh, does it? So what I had them do was pull up the job, look it up. What jobs are open? How much are they paying an hour? And how many hours are you getting? Because what's $30 an hour if you're only getting 10 hours?
Practical.
Yeah, then this is what I'm saying. Like, giving people the tools and agency to do things.
Nobody ever told me to do that when I was in high school.
So, like,
hey, look and see how much a journalist makes. Nobody ever told me to do that.
So with that, like, it paid $30 an hour, but the closest job that was available was 3 hours away, part-time, overnight, only offered 10 hours. I'm like, she doesn't even have enough money to get her a place for this job that's 3 hours away. Like, it's like putting those pieces together, like some of the financial literacy, like contractual work that I've done. Yeah, it's like giving them real tools that they can use. Yeah. Like, I have this youth thing that I do where I have students build a budget. You 25, you free. What is your life? What does your dream life look like? I make them go on apartments.com, pick out an apartment in your dream location. Go to Auto Trader, pick you out a car because they had a little monthly payment. And I make them build out a budget because in their minds, a lot of times, because they've never touched money. So they automatically think like, I need millions of dollars in order to be successful, in order to meet my basic necessities. Most students, I have not had a student that when they built the budget that it was over like $50,000, $60,000. And then you start to put practicality behind it. So yes, now you need $50,000 to meet your demands as a young professional. Let's go to Indeed. Like, let's use the tools that are available to us right now. Plug in a salary, plug in entry level, and just see what comes up.
I've actually started that during my 10th grade year. My 10th grade year is the year that I turned 16, and I built a LinkedIn and an Indeed, and I networked at Microsoft for our trip, and I actually got in contact with some of the higher ups, and they're offering a summer internship that pays $18 an hour.
It's amazing.
But that's how you start. They start to see themselves in these spaces because it becomes real for them. It's not just this thing that lives out there that is called success, but I don't know what my attachment to it is.
And you have to understand the foundations between it, and you have to talk to people around you so you can understand it. I had to start my budgeting now because life is moving faster. They just cut my Social Security off because of my other house in Georgia. So now I have to start budgeting because I don't have that $800 to keep me sustainable every day, every month. So I have to learn how to budget, and I have to do job searching now and understand how much it pays me, what jobs are open, and then when can I do it. I'm glad that my school gives us programs where we can get entry-level certifications, but I'm also going to need my diploma and whatever degree that they need me to have in that field.
But what goes along with that is like my family's background is trade. My mother required, like, it was non-negotiable in our household. We was all gonna have a trade under our belt. I went to school for cosmetology. So like my sister did culinary, my brothers did roofing. I come from a trade family. I got truckers, everything you can think of, phlebotomists. We got it in our family, right? From a trade perspective. So I understand the necessity to meet people where they are, but we have to create systems that they can on and off ramp whenever necessary. So like if I start here with a trade certification, when you really look at who's making the money is who owns the business. And 80% of those who, I want to say it was like 80% of those who own trade spaces all have bachelor's degrees or higher. And their kids are going to college too. So it's like we keep selling our families these dreams of like, this is where all the money is made. But it's like, yeah, as you move up and as you elevate, but what's happening is our families hit these ceilings because they don't have the credentials. Like, oh, sorry, you can't apply for this manager role because it requires an associate's degree. Like, these are the things and the realities that we are not sharing with our families that we want to make sure that
So we just got to talk more, first of all.
Yeah. It should be pushed.
We got to talk more
into middle schools. Like
it should.
Like,
and it is going
like it should start 6th grade, if not 6th grade, possibly
you ain't
even 5th
lying,
grade.
Kenneth.
Yeah.
You're not lying.
I had my first
talk to you.
Yeah.
We're over time already. It went by so quickly. We could talk to you forever. So we have to do a part 2.
Okay.
Yes.
We absolutely have to do a part 2. Go ahead, Donna.
I just want people to hear this though, because so many times those of us in the justice community complain about tax captures, thinking that tax captures are siphoning money away from our schools and our children. But this is an example of when tax captures are putting money back in our pockets, and our children have the opportunity to pursue college with little to no debt.
Yeah.
You can't promise no debt for everybody, but little to no debt, which is really amazing. It's, transformational. I just want to know which students qualify for Detroit Promise before we close out.
Yep. So that's what I want to highlight. This part of the promise is also to attract and attain talent in the city. Because what we're seeing is our students being moved out of the city, our talent being moved out of the city to go to schools outside of the city. And then they form those identities that they then attach to, and they don't come back to the city. And that piece becomes important, that we attract and retain our talent. So the requirements for the promise is that you have to live and attend Detroit schools in order to access Detroit Promise. So for the 4-year scholarship, you have to live and attend a Detroit high school. And it could be any high school, charter, public, private, as well as virtual and homeschool. Yeah. And you have to attend the high school, Detroit high school for 4 years, and you have to live in the city for 4 years. For the community college, it's 2 years and 2 years, the junior and senior year of high school. So, and then what we're moving towards is offering program and resources no matter when you kind of graduate, but the scholarship itself is tied to the commitment to Detroit education. And that commitment is by sending your students to Detroit schools and actually being in Detroit to contribute to that tax capture.
So as we're looking to rebuild our population in the city of Detroit, parents who aren't sure whether you're getting a better education in the suburbs, and you can get a good education in Detroit, by the way. You can still get a quality education in the city of Detroit, but you also can get free college in the city of Detroit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow.
Onjila, thank you for coming on Authentically Detroit.
Thank you for having me.
If you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and X, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right, it's time for shout-outs. Donna, you have any shout-outs?
Yeah, I got a shout out. My baby Camille Johnson threw down on Thanksgiving.
We knew she would.
She cooked everything. I cooked a honey baked ham. Long story, but hint, I didn't cook it. I stood in a long, long line, but I did not cook it.
Ken, if you have any shout-outs?
My shout out goes out to 482 and the other organizations coming out to advocate for the 2 Western students.
Nice. Onjila, any shout-outs from you?
Shout out to Detroit students. May your chart and your path forward be the one that you need it to be to prosper how you need to prosper.
I love it. I love it. Hey, y'all. Shout out to y'all, our listeners, for always listening. We thank you so much for that. And until next time, we want you to love on your neighbor.